Welcome to Picks with the Professor, the show where a real statistics professor gives you sports betting tips. I am your host, Professor Sides. It's my actual job title and last name, which part of the reason why the mathematical model that I have built to predict various sports outcomes is affectionately known as Sideline. You'll hear more about the model during the course of this episode. It's set to cover the 8 best college basketball games and one off-the-wall game scheduled to be played on Tuesday, February 21st, 2023. In case you're here, check out the webpage on the banner. It's www.pickswiththeprofessor.com/new for some explanations and community rules. See the Google Sheet linked in the show description for Sideline's projection on every single game. Remember, this show covers picks on the best games for the best picks on all games. Sign up on Patreon or Black Book Sports for different packages and price ranges based on your needs. Remember, sports are unpredictable. So the discussion on this show is projecting a typical game, as we talked about in yesterday's show, thinking about kind of what the average outcome would be over a 7-game series. We take that long-term view around here. Can't get distracted when one team is on fire or ice cold. These things balance out in the long run, but are hard to foresee before they happen. In other words, please understand good and bad variance will occur. So as much as I'd like to say we'll be profitable each and every day, that is an impossible reality for any gambler. Obviously, we like the good variance more than the bad variance, but we're going to get both. That's just the way it goes. Jake would normally be with us here today. He had a scheduling quirk here at the last minute, wasn't able to, so I'm going to take us home. One other programming note just to mention real quick. Did make some updates to the model on Sunday. Nothing, both kind of drastic and not drastic. Both drastic in that it becomes harder and harder to find good edges down the stretch of college basketball season. It's happening this year. It happened last year. It happened the year before. It's not a new phenomenon. And so trying to figure out ways to do better at the end of the season. My goal is always to improve. I laugh when people, when we have a bad night, you could do better, like I'm always trying to do better. If I go 7-1, I'm trying to go 8-0, right? I'm always trying to go better. I'm always tweaking, always improving. Some of that change I made, again, kind of drastic, kind of not drastic, because again, we take that long-term view around here, and I don't want to try to overreact to something. The example we talked about this week, right? TCU winning by 25. There was no way I should have predicted that. No one should have. If you predicted that from a model, now if you came out and said, I think TCU is going to be hot, I think they're going to run away, that's one thing. But a model predicting a team's going to get hot, that seems kind of foolish, right? Because you don't know who's going to get hot on any given night. You know how a team's going to play, or how if a team's better or not. You should predict better teams to win. What we're trying to do with the model is just figure out where there's some value, because Vegas says on average they think the team wins by 5, and we say on average we think they win by 7. And that doesn't mean they're going to win by 5 or 7. We just think in general the average game is going to be a little bit more high scoring than they do, a little bit bigger margin of victory, right? And that's kind of what we're trying to do here. So not trying to overreact. So the changes aren't drastic. The model's still relatively accurate. You can see that in the Google Sheet link in the show description. There's a tab there with weekly results and daily results. And you can go all the way to the right-hand side. I've got average error for my model and other popular models and what the spread is. And we're missing about the same amount of the spread is. So it's not like the model's bad. It's just trying to figure out how to get better performance here at the end of the season. So some kind of drastic, but also not drastic changes at the same time, if that makes sense. So just an FYI there, I don't think it does too much. The other thing is that the model is just kind of constantly updating itself, and we've seen so many points in college basketball. So we're starting to see the model like overs more and more, because early on, 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, when we started seeing more points being scored, it was kind of like, hey, it's kind of like a 1-week trend. Last year, the same thing happened for 1 week or 2 weeks. It happens every year, 1 week, 2 weeks, right? But it kind of keeps happening. So the model's really starting to say, like, yeah, this is real. This isn't, I can't explain it. This isn't just some ups and downs, right? This is a lot of data now where the scoring has just gotten really high. So the model's just kind of saying, okay, I can't keep ignoring this, right? You kind of do ignore outlier performances. And we had some outlier weeks. The model was kind of ignoring it. But at some point now it's like, oh, maybe that's not the outlier. We're getting a lot more points. So you'll see the model total projections going to start eking up higher and higher here, because it's not going away. We keep seeing really high scoring games. So we're going to see kind of leaning more towards overs. Now, it'll be interesting. Next week, we start conference tournaments. Got neutral site games. We tend to have a lower scoring games there. Teams tend to, try to get, better possessions, that sort of thing. So we're going to see a little bit of a different style when you get to conference tournaments next week, into the week after, and then into the March Madness. So I don't know how long we'll be able to capitalize this, but at least the regular season game studies these last 2 weeks kind of be on more overs and unders, and I think you're going to see that today. Got a lot of great games to talk about. Really excited for this Tuesday slate. As usual, it's a dandy. But before we get to that, some reminders. Please hit that like button if you're on YouTube. Also, if you aren't yet, please consider subscribing or following It's free, and if you turn notifications on, you won't miss any of the college basketball, MLB, or college football content that this channel provides. I've already mentioned the Patreon, but check it out if you haven't yet. There are a lot of great benefits over there above and beyond what we do here. Plays of the day, model picks, ad-free shows, projections given to you in your email inbox the morning before the game. So if you got offshore books, you can jump on really bad opening lines and profit off of that before the line moves. A lot of great benefits over there. It's www.patreon.com/pickswiththeprofessor. But even if you're not there, we're still thrilled that you're here. Get to here. But as always, take what you like. And if you don't, leave it and don't do what I recommend. Because if you don't like it, I don't want you betting your money on something that you don't like or that I haven't talked you into, one or the other. 7 p.m. Eastern, Miami at Virginia Tech. What should be a really great contest. I've got Miami ranked as the 33rd best team right now in college basketball. Virginia Tech, 61st. Virginia Tech, I swear every year seems to be on the bubble at 61. They'd be on the wrong side of that bubble, of course. A little bit of a disappointing start to the conference season, but they've been playing well at home. I don't know who wins this game. I think it's pretty well priced right now. It's Virginia Tech -2 is the number that I'm seeing. I think that's pretty good. There are a couple 2.5s out there. If you can get to 3, maybe Miami's worth a look, getting that many points. It should be a tight game. Miami's, been a pretty good team here as of late. Model wants 4 with Miami before it becomes an A grade. So it's not really that close to an A grade. Again, at 2, I think it's pretty well priced. The model says it should be Virginia Tech -1.9. Again, note that Virginia Tech has been pretty spot on with regards to both the model and the spread. Miami's been overperforming. So if that's the case, maybe it should only be Virginia Tech -1.5. So again, I'd lean Miami. Just don't think there's enough value on it right now, but I really do like this over 153.5. It's a large number, but the model's projecting 157.5. We should really be flirting with 160 in this game. The reason why, it's not about pace. You're going to have about an average pace in this one. Virginia Tech's on the bottom on the bottom half of the median on pace. Miami's on the top half. That should balance out. Neither team's really extreme. Be a pretty average pace. But you got 2 defenses that sit outside the top 100 in college basketball, 2 offenses that are pretty good. I've got Miami inside the top 10. Virginia Tech, I've got inside the top 25. You have great, efficient offenses and not great defenses. That should lead to a lot of points. You've got a tight game. It makes it even more likely for more points. You could see a little bit slower start to the second half. We've seen that on occasion. The games that have gone under in college basketball have mostly been a second half that started off just a first half that's been high scoring and a second half that's been really slow because these teams are, trying to get better looks. I'm not sure that happens here. I think these teams are going to be able to get really good looks without slowing the game down because the offenses are just that good and the defenses aren't. So I don't think we see much of a slowdown here. That tight game could give us late game fouls, got a chance for overtime, just a lot of ways to get over. Again, I think this number should be closer, at least 155, up in the upper 150s. 153.5, way too low. Like I said, I think we flirt with 160. Not sure we get there, but I think we can at least get well into the 150. So I like the over in Miami, Virginia Tech. Also 7 p.m. Eastern, got 4 games in this time slot, so there's a lot of really good ones happening. Mississippi State at Missouri. Going to grab the 2.5 points with Mississippi State. It's an A grade play at +2.5, and it's about even money. That's equivalent to +3, so a +2.5 even money-ish, or +3. That's an A grade play according to the model. This line confuses me. I don't see how we're getting this many points with Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State's firmly the better team. I was just down, and you saw the background change down with my parents this last week. I was talking to my dad about the teams projecting the tournament or whatever, and I got Mississippi State as kind of solidly in would be my projections, not like at a 6 seed, but solidly as like a 9 or a 10 seed. Missouri wouldn't even be sniffing the tournament. I've got Mississippi State here in the top 40. I've got Missouri at 67th. And so I don't quite see this line. This line implies that Missouri's close to Mississippi State. I don't think that's true. Missouri's offense, fantastic. I've got them 10th in the country. Mississippi State's defense, I've got them at 6th in the country. So if we say those offset, because those are 2 great units, and that's probably going to be a great matchup from great offense on Missouri, great defense on Mississippi State. But on the flip side of the ball, Mississippi State's offense, while not good, I've got it 150th. They're still in the top half of college basketball. Missouri's defense, while not good, I've got them at 208 in the bottom half of college basketball. So, I mean, it should be strength on strength when Missouri has the ball, but when Mississippi State has the ball, they're going to have an edge. Now, they are on the road, so I don't think Mississippi State should be favored here necessarily, but I think this is a coin toss game. I think Mississippi State is better than Missouri by enough to make this a coin flip to really offset the home court. Missouri plays great at home, as do a lot of teams I talk about in the Big Ten, talk about more of those later. The SEC, the Big 12, the Big East, a lot of these teams play really well at home. I'm giving Missouri 3.5 points here for home court. Still think this should be a coin toss game. So getting 2.5 Mississippi State at great odds or +3, I think is a great investment on the Bulldogs. Total in this one is 138.5. The model projects 141.5, so the model would lean over. I don't really know. I think the total is going to be a really fascinating one to watch here. If I had to play it, I definitely would go over, simply because this feels like a game where one team really wants to slow it down. One team really wants to speed it up. And when that happens, if you just take the average approach, you just say, well, it's probably going to be about an average game. And on average, we've had way more than 138.5 points in a game. So I think it kind of plays out average. The issue is the variance is really huge. If Mississippi State kind of has their way and controls the pace of this game, it's going to go way under. If Missouri kind of has their way and controls the pace, it's going to go way over. So a lot of variance in the total, so it's not really worth an investment on, but I do think the number's a little bit low. I like Mississippi State in either type of game. Obviously, if they play their game, you have to like them being comfortable with that. But even if this gets into a track meet, yes, Missouri's offense is incredible at home and they can put up a lot of points, but I think that Mississippi State's offense is getting a little bit of a bad rap here. Again, I think they're better than Missouri's defense. So even though they're on the road, even if this game gets to a track meet, I don't have faith in Missouri stopping Mississippi State. I think they can hang around. I think it's a tight contest, a close game. I think if you played this game 100 times, I think each team wins 50 of them. And with that being said, that makes Mississippi State either money line or plus points a pretty good investment. Sticking in the SEC, 7 p.m. Eastern, another A-grade play for here. Tennessee plus 1.5 at the Aggies. I've talked a lot about A&M. I love them. I think they've been underrated. They've been playing really well. I backed them a lot as of late. I'm going to back the Vols here. Number one, Tennessee, what are you? I have no idea what to make of this team. They times where they look like a number one seed, maybe even the best team in the country, and they have times where they just look clueless. I don't know what to make of this team, but I still think they're really good. Now, the obvious asterisk here, two of Tennessee's better players missed the last game, kind of a last-minute thing, didn't really know that was going to happen. As of right now, it sounds like they're going to be a game-time decision. So it also sounds like one of those things where even if you're watching this on Monday night, Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon, you still won't know if it's a true game-time decision. So one aspect of this is just don't know if those guys are going to play pass. The model's taking an approach leaning towards them playing. This number that I've built is mostly with them playing. It's Tennessee by 2.3. That assumes they play. If they don't, that changes a lot. It's mostly assuming they play. If those guys play, I think it's really Tennessee by 3. It would be the average win. I'm not trying to predict one game. Again, predicting one game is crazy. I think on average, Tennessee wins this by 3. If those guys are playing, those two guys combined are worth, 6 points maybe. I mean, it's a lot. It's potentially their best player, 2 of the top 4. And thankfully it's not 2 of their stronger offensive players, but 2 of their stronger defensive players that really take that defense from, really to the next level. With fully healthy Tennessee, number 1 defense in the country, according to my model. Without those guys, it's still really good. They got a lot of depth. They're still a really good team, but it's not quite as strong, and on the road that might matter a little bit. So I really think it's kind of like A&M -3 if those guys don't play, Tennessee -3 if they do. I lean towards, I think they're going to play. Even if only one plays, I think it's a coin toss game. Getting a 1.5 makes a lot of sense here. I just think we're getting a little bit of an overreaction. I know what just happened. A&M's been on fire. Absolutely. I think this is just a little bit of an overreaction to Tennessee, who apparently just can't figure Kentucky out and looks terrible against them. Because remember the game before that, Tennessee, played pretty well against Alabama too. So Tennessee's been up and down. It's kind of the zigzag theory here of, let's not overreact to the last thing we saw, which with Tennessee was they looked terrible. And so that doesn't mean they look great here. Again, those 2 guys are really key. So if you just want to pass on it because those guys' status, being up in the air at this point, that makes a lot of sense. I'm leaning towards, I think they play. As long as at least one plays, I think this is a good play. If both play, it's an A-grade play according to the model. So I'm locking it as an A-grade. I'm putting my money here with Tennessee, getting a 1.5. I think they got a really good chance to win. I know A&M has been hot. If we overvalue what happens, let me I ramble a lot. I'm talking fast. Sorry if I'm talking too fast here, but here's what I can tell you. If I go into my model and I upweight just the last 4 weeks and I say really focus on how a team's been playing in the last 4 weeks, the error in the model skyrockets. That doesn't mean that's not important sometimes. It just means on aggregate, it's a lot of noise. Ames been playing great. They are on fire. Kudos to them. Hats off. Tennessee's been up and down and kind of more down than up as of late, but those other games matter on the model, taking those into account. Again, assuming they're at least mostly at full strength. I still think they're better than this A&M team by a lot. So I'm going to take them to win this one on the road. Total is 129, and we've been riding these Tennessee unders, and they've been really, really profitable for us. There was one game that they missed, but the other, I don't know, last like 7 or 8, been talking about these. They've all hit, but that one. Models is 130.5, thinks maybe the numbers caught up. I would not go over, even though the model leans over. I don't know if I'd go under. The number's getting really low here. It's probably a pass on the total. If you want to keep riding the Tennessee unders, I don't blame you, but 129 is just, it just feels maybe a little bit too low personally for this. So I'm sitting this one out. I'm getting off the train. If you want to keep riding the Tennessee unders, though, I don't blame you. It's just a pass for me, the total. So the number's just a little bit too low for my liking. Last 7 p.m. Eastern game here, Baylor at Kansas State. Baylor had been playing fantastic. I mentioned this in the show yesterday with Jake, and that was true through the first half at Lawrence. And then halftime happened, and Kansas State decided to come out with an intensity that Baylor just could not match. And, there's some questions now. Is that just an aberration? Is that just Kansas getting hot? In Lawrence, they just couldn't miss. How much I would say, you can't really write off the first half of that game, because that's what Baylor's been doing for the last, month now, month and a half. They've been looking that good. So that first half, yeah, you could say Baylor couldn't miss or whatever. And that's kind of been more or less what's happened. So I think that first half, I don't think that was really an aberration. The second half, the question mark, is it? Or is that just is that the same sort of thing that's going to plague them here at Kansas State? Really tough place to play here, the Octagon of Doom. It's not one of my favorite places as a Baylor fan to have my team go in. They've won there a couple times, but I feel like every time they go in there and win, it's you're just happy to escape with the victory, right? It's a really tough place to play. Y'all know I've loved this Kansas State team. But Kansas State just hasn't looked that good as of late. So I don't really know what to make of this one. I lean Baylor. The model leans Kansas State. So it's really just a pass for me on the side. Most of you probably know this story, but we got a lot of new followers in here. In case you don't, and if you've heard the story, a lot of you have heard the story like 7 times now, but 2000 and whatever year we're in now, right? 2021 World Series Game 6, my official pick was on the Braves against my own Houston Astros. I was at the game. I picked against my team, was at the game, and watched the Braves win a World Series on my home field. So I'm not afraid to pick against my team, right? I'm number one about the money, right? So if I think my team's going to win, I'll pick them. I picked the Astros in Game 6 this year of the World Series and watched them win, right? Picked against them in Game 6 the year before, watched them lose, right? So I'm going to pick what I think is the smart pick here, right? So just because I'm a Baylor alum, I'm not just picking like I do still think what I've seen here, I like the way this team's playing. I can give them a pass for that performance in Lawrence. I don't like what I've seen from Kansas State, so I think Baylor probably the side I want to be on, but it's just not a comfortable play. I really think it's just one more to pass on and just watch and learn and see, because I think we're going to learn a lot here, how Baylor bounces back from that game, and can Kansas State really right the ship of they had looked fantastic for so long and just kind of, sputtering a little bit here over the last month. So a really interesting game to watch from the side perspective. Number bouncing around a pick 'em model says about a pick 'em. So again, passing there, I'm going to go over 145.5. Model says 150. Both of these teams have been pretty spot on with regards to the model projections for the total. You've got Baylor up now in my model, the number 2 efficient offense in the country. They don't play extremely fast, but Kansas State does. So you can combine Kansas State's pace and Baylor's efficiency. There should be a lot of points in this one. And again, as I mentioned, with the over at the top with Miami and Virginia Tech, tight contest. It should be a chance for late game fouls, a chance for overtime. I think over 145.5 makes a lot of sense here. I think we're going to get closer to 150. I don't think we can touch 160 like that one, simply because I do think Baylor will slow it down a little bit here. Kansas State's got a pretty decent defense. So 160 seems a little bit out of reach, but we only got to get up into the upper 140s for this one to go over. 8:30 p.m. Eastern, Marquette and Creighton. I mean, what should be a fantastic contest here. Marquette and Creighton, two teams that have just been on fire, been a lot of fun to watch and mostly a lot of fun to back. The spread on this right now is 5.5. The model says Creighton minus 5.1. And it's been underestimating Creighton a tiny bit and overestimating Marquette. So given that, I might say I think 5.5 is a really good number. It's just a straight pass for me. If I could lay 4.5 with Creighton, I might do that. If I could get 6.5, 7 with Marquette, I might do that right here in the middle. I think it's a really well-placed line. I'm going to go over again, though, over 147.5. The model says 150.5. And then you got two teams. The model's been pretty spot on with the projections. This game, again, kind of similar to the one we just talked about with regards to one team's got a great offense. One team's got a spectacular offense. Creighton in the top 25, Marquette at number 5 offensively. Creighton does have a really good defense, but there should be some decent pace in this one as well. Marquette's going to play in the top 100 with regards to pace. Creighton's not really going to slow it down that much. Again, they do have a good defense, but I just think there's just too much offense in this. I think we can get into the 150, so I think over 147.5. A smart play in Marquette and Creighton. So the 9 p.m. slot, got 3 great games for you here before we hit to the overtime segment. Indiana at Michigan State. I'm going to lay the 2 with Michigan State here as the home team. Indiana really had a chance to show me something against Illinois on Saturday at home. Illinois missing Terrence Shannon and needed a miracle to win that game. A game that we laid whatever it was 4.5 and the 3.5. I don't know what number it was. We didn't get there, and the number got out to like 7.5 with Shannon out. Didn't even sniff a cover. And that's one game, right? I'm not going to overreact to 40 minutes, but what I saw in that game, kudos to Illinois, but I just thought Indiana at home should have been able to control that game, and they weren't really able to do that with Illinois' best player out. I think they're going to have a hard time on the road here. Michigan State's first home game now since the tragedy happened there last week. They played really well on Saturday at Michigan. If you watch that game, it was tied with like 4 minutes to go or 3 minutes to go or something like that. And then Michigan just went on this crazy run at the end of the game. It's very similar to the North Carolina State game, in case you missed that one, just as something dropping that nugget. We got the one with North Carolina State on Sunday, but that game was also tied with 4 minutes to go or something like that. The final score is going to look deceptive in both of those games. Michigan State was right in that game, tied late on the road. I think Michigan State was a better team for most of that game. Just kind of fell apart a little bit at the end. I think home is enough to get them the victory. I don't mind laying a short number like 2. The model says 2.2, so the model's not really giving us any help here. I just think that home road matters a lot here, and that's kind of the tiebreaker for me in this one. It's not about Michigan State plays better at home. It's not about Indiana plays worse on the road. It's about all of these big schools pretty much do that. It's not just a name this one school who does this. Across the board, these teams are 3.5 to 4 points better at home and 3.5 to 4 points worse on the road. And that really matters. I do think that Indiana is the better team. I'm still not even sure. You never know when they're going to have somebody sitting out or who's going to be out there. That could even give us an extra boost. I just think Michigan State good enough at home to win. At Indiana, I think it would be a different story, but at home, I like Michigan State. I like laying a number like this. Again, 1 is the least likely way to win until you get to about the double digits. So at 2, maybe we push, but it's going to be hard to lose this one. So I'm going to back Sparty here at laying 2. Total's 135. Model says 137.3, but it's been overestimating both teams a lot on the total. So it's a pass for me on the totals. I would not be going over, even though the model leans that way, just because both these teams have been pretty under as of late. 9 p.m. Eastern, Texas Tech at Oklahoma. I'm going to grab the 2.5 with the Red Raiders. They did us well on Saturday. I really like what I've seen from them lately. And this goes back to what I said about not really overreacting too much. There was a couple of weeks ago when we started kind of backing Texas Tech, and we were saying, they had looked poor for so long, but at the beginning of the season, entering conference play, we thought Tech might be one of the top 3 teams in the conference. We thought they might be one of the better teams, even though they lost the aforementioned Terrence Shannon. We still thought they'd be really good, and then they just crumbled. They couldn't win a close game. They had a couple of no-show halves. Everything went wrong for them. But now that they're turning it back around, they're kind of showing what we saw in the non-conference, what we thought about them in the preseason, where we kind of thought this might be one of the teams in the top half of the Big 12. And that's the team they're looking like now. Winning in Morgantown, no easy feat. They hung in there in that game, was able to pull it out. I see the same thing here. I think they can hang around. I don't know if they can pull it out, but getting 2.5 points, I think, is a value opportunity for us. Same as the last game. Model says 2.5, so the model's not giving us any help. I'm just not sold on this Oklahoma team. I think they kind of shot their shot this last weekend here in Austin, getting that game to overtime, that being their biggest rival in UT. I'm not sure how much they're going to have for this game. I think Tech's really on a mission. They're moving the right direction. They're eyeing a tournament bid despite being left for dead, a couple of weeks ago. I think Tech's had a great chance to pull this off. I like getting 2.5 points or the plus odds on the money line, either one. Not a strong model play, but just as someone who's watched a lot of Big 12, I think the road team's got a shot, just like they did Saturday. I think they hang around. Don't know how the end plays out. Maybe you want to take a first half bet just to avoid the late game foul situation. Maybe that makes sense, or maybe the money line just because you get the plus odds, and then who knows how it ends. But it could be a one bucket game too. A lot of ways you can kind of play this. It's really personal preference, whatever you think on. There's not really one magic way. If someone says first half's better or money line's better, points better, it's all about the same. So it's really kind of personal preference, however you feel. I just like what I've seen from Tech here. I really think they're showing us that they are one of the top half of in the top half of the Big 12, whereas Oklahoma all season I've been saying is in the bottom half of the Big 12. Obviously, they had that great Alabama victory, had a couple of good games. But for the most part, they're one of the weaker teams in the conference, and Tech looks like the real deal, like we thought they were going to be. So I'm going to back them again here tonight. 9 p.m. Eastern, Iowa State at Texas. You'll know I've faded Texas a lot. It's mostly workforce. They've mostly been overvalued. As of late, the model's been pretty spot on with both teams. It says Texas -7 is the right number. I'm going to grab 7.5 with Iowa State. Not a strong play, only about a C grade at this point. But to me, Texas is the better team, and they're at home, but you can't trust them to win by this much. You saw it against Oklahoma on Saturday. I think Iowa State comes out and plays with that same intensity. They, top 10 defense. Think they can really frustrate the Longhorns offensively. I think it's a close game. I think Iowa State hangs around. Is it likely Iowa State wins? No. But was it really likely that Tech would win in West Virginia? No. Was it likely that Oklahoma would win in Texas on Saturday? Heck no. That was like an 11-point spread, and they, had a chance, that game. So I think it's kind of the same thing. I think Iowa State's got a chance to hang around. I just like getting points here in these Big 12 games when, it's really hard to say that the top teams and the bottom teams are that far apart. I think Texas is a better team, but it's only by the smallest margin here. And if Iowa State hits any threes with how good that defense is, they can play with anybody in the country. So who knows if that happens, but I think in general that defense can keep them in this game. I like getting 7.5 with the Cyclones here. Total 135.5. Model says 135.8. Been pretty spot on with Iowa State totals here, but Texas has been going over. So if you wanted to play a total, I'd probably go over rather than under. It's not really a comfortable play though for me, given that Iowa State, like I talked about, their defense is so good, and they're going to really want to suck the air into this game. You've got Texas a top 100 pace team, Iowa State a bottom 100 pace team. Knowing that they're on the road, Iowa State's really going to try to slow this one down. So I'd probably just go over, knowing how Texas has been dragging teams up. They're the home team. They should be able to control the pace a little bit better, but I like Iowa State plus 7.5 more than I like playing the over at the number that it is now in that 135.5 spot. We're 6 to overtime. One other great play, decent game. Just doesn't really compare to those first 8. Those first 8 games are all going to be incredible, in my opinion. Must-see TV type things. Make sure you're watching those if you can. This one, a little bit less good, but it's kind of that standalone late slot. 11 p.m. Eastern, Colorado State at San Diego State. There's a great edge on this one. I love the over 135.5. The model says 141. We've been a little bit overestimating on San Diego State, but a little bit underestimating on Colorado State. I think that balances out. I think that 141 number is pretty spot on. You're not going to have a ton of pace in this one, but you're not going to have a snail's pace either. Both these teams rate out pace-wise at least outside of the outside the bottom 100. So again, they're not fast. They're in the bottom half, but they're not in the bottom 100. And I think the perception is that this is going to be a really slow pace game, but I think it's just going to be an okay pace game. It's not going to be too slow. It won't be fast, but I don't think it'll be that slow. I think that perception is what's driving this number down, but you've got two offenses that are pretty decent. I've got San Diego State at 50, Colorado State at 60. And while San Diego State does play some good defense, Colorado State does not. San Diego State should be able to name their score here. They're going to have a huge edge at home offensively. Model says they put up 77. I think in the upper 70s towards 80, I think is where they land. Colorado State, I think has a good enough offense to score. It's not like, San Diego State's defense is very good, but it's not like it's going to completely shut down an offense that's as efficient as Colorado State. I think there's a decent number of points in this one relative to these expectations. I think it's about an average game. An average, we've seen about 141. And I think a slightly slower pace, but slight edge to the offenses on the aggregate balances out. We've seen about 142-ish points in games, 143, 141, somewhere in that ballpark, depending on the week. I think that's about where this lands. I think over 135.5 is a great play to wrap up the night here in the late slot out in San Diego. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Picks with the Professor. Don't forget to subscribe so you can enjoy all the sports betting content provided on this channel. It's dropped right into your feed. Be back again tomorrow with more college basketball betting tips. And until then, as always, best of luck. And remember, you can eat your betting money, but please don't bet your eating money.